They called it a discovery that should have been impossible. Pulled from the depths of the sea, encrusted with centuries of rust and coral, it looked at first like nothing more than a broken lump of bronze. But as archaeologists began to clean it, gears emerged, wheels interlocked with astonishing precision, inscriptions that suggested a level of scientific knowledge no one believed existed in the ancient world. It has been called the world's first computer. And the mystery is not only how it worked, but why it even existed at all, because according to the timeline we have been taught, this machine simply should not exist. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, was discovered by sponge divers in 1901 off the coast of a small Greek island. They weren't looking for history. They were looking for sponges. Instead, they found a Roman-era shipwreck packed with treasures, statues, pottery, jewelry. But hidden among the loot was this strange corroded object, ignored at first because no one could make sense of it. Years later, as scholars examined it more closely, they realized it was something extraordinary. This device, dated to around 100 BCE, contained more than 30 bronze gears, meshing together in ways that could track astronomical movements, predict eclipses, and calculate the cycles of the heavens with uncanny accuracy. Here's the problem. Such complex gearwork was not supposed to appear until over 1,000 years later. The sophistication rivaled that of 18th century clockmaking. How could ancient Greeks have built a device so advanced, only for it to vanish from history? Why do we not see similar machines again until much later in Europe's Renaissance? Was it really a one-of-a-kind genius invention, or evidence of a lost body of knowledge erased from the historical record? The official explanation is fascinating but also incomplete. Most scholars agree the mechanism was a kind of analog computer designed to model the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. It could tell you the date of upcoming eclipses, track the timing of the Olympic Games, even predict the position of celestial bodies decades in advance. It was, in essence, a miniature cosmos you could hold in your hands. But this answer only raises bigger questions. Who built it? Why did they build it? And how did such knowledge disappear so completely? Some historians point to Archimedes, the Greek mathematician and engineer, as a possible source of inspiration. He was known to have created or theorized advanced mechanical devices, and Syracuse, his home, was famous for its engineers. Others suggest the knowledge may have come from Babylonian astronomy, passed through Greek hands. Yet the sheer precision of the Antikythera mechanism remains baffling. It required not only astronomical knowledge, but advanced metalworking techniques, exact measurements, and a level of craftsmanship we have no evidence of anywhere else from that era. Think about this. If one such machine survived by chance, buried at the bottom of the sea for 2,000 years, how many others might have existed and been lost? Was this truly unique, or part of a tradition, deliberately hidden, destroyed, or forgotten? The silence in the historical record is deafening. There are no detailed writings from the time describing such a machine. There are hints. Cicero mentions devices built by Archimedes that could model the heavens, but nothing as concrete as the Antikythera mechanism itself. It stands alone, like a ghost from a future that should not have been possible. This is why conspiracy theories thrive around it. Some claim it is evidence of knowledge passed down from a forgotten civilization, perhaps Atlantis, perhaps some prehistoric culture wiped out and remembered only in myth. Others go further, suggesting alien influence, pointing to the uncanny leap in technology that appears suddenly, then disappears just as suddenly. Of course, mainstream historians reject these claims, but they cannot deny the enigma. Why does this level of technology appear in 100 BCE and then vanish for over a millennium? Imagine living in the ancient world and seeing this device in action. A priest or scholar turning the gears, showing the future positions of the stars, predicting an eclipse with eerie precision. To ordinary people, it must have seemed like magic. To rulers, it would have been power to legitimize authority by aligning decisions with the heavens. Power to appear as if you controlled time itself. Was the Antikythera Mechanism a scientific tool, or was it also a political weapon? If only the elite had access to it, knowledge of the skies could be monopolized, turned into prophecy, guidance, manipulation. The machine was not just gears and dials, it was control. And maybe that is why it vanished. Knowledge is rarely lost by accident. Sometimes it is suppressed, hoarded, erased. If a device like this gave too much power to a few, perhaps its destruction was deliberate. Or perhaps wars, invasions, and the collapse of empires simply buried it, along with so many other things we will never know. But the fact that it resurfaced at all forces us to confront a haunting possibility. History, as we are taught, it is incomplete. The past may not be a straight line of progress, but a series of rises and falls, with peaks of brilliance lost in the valleys of forgetting. Every time we look at the Antikythera Mechanism, we are reminded of how little we truly know. Was it the pinnacle of one genius's mind, or the remnant of an entire tradition erased from time? And if it is the latter, what else has been erased? The Antikythera Mechanism is often called the world's first computer, but in truth, it was something more than that. It wasn't just about calculating numbers, it was about predicting the future. Imagine living in a time when the sun and moon controlled farming, harvests, festivals, even the moods of entire populations. If someone held a device that could predict eclipses, alignments, and cosmic cycles, they weren't simply a scientist. They were a prophet. And perhaps that was the real function of this mysterious machine. When researchers first reconstructed its workings, they discovered dials that could track the metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same days of the year. It could also model the Saros cycle, which predicts eclipses. Think about that. In an age before telescopes, before modern physics, here was a handheld object that could tell you when the sky itself would darken. How could such knowledge not be seen as divine? If a ruler or priest possessed this machine, it could reinforce their authority in ways more powerful than armies. After all, power is not just about controlling land. It's about controlling belief. Some scholars argue that this was precisely its purpose, a sacred tool used in temples or by elites to interpret the will of the gods. But others believe it had more practical uses. It could regulate calendars, ensuring that agricultural cycles matched celestial events. It could determine when to hold the Olympic Games. It could synchronize human society with the cosmos, a level of order that seems astonishingly advanced for the time. Yet here's the troubling part. If this knowledge existed, why did it vanish? The Middle Ages produced no equivalent machines. For over 1,000 years, Europe and the Mediterranean seemed to forget that such mechanical precision was even possible. When geared clocks finally reappeared in the 14th century, they were hailed as revolutionary, yet they were still less sophisticated than the Antikythera Mechanism. Are we really to believe that such brilliance simply appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared centuries later? Or are we staring at the evidence of a much larger pattern, that history is full of peaks of knowledge that collapse, leaving future generations to start again from scratch? Archaeology hints at this. Throughout the world, we find artifacts and structures that seem out of place, too advanced for their supposed era. The Antikythera Mechanism joins this list as one of the most tangible examples. Unlike myths of Atlantis or legends of lost civilizations, it is a physical object, undeniable in its complexity. That makes it dangerous, in a sense, because it challenges the neat timeline of human progress. It suggests the line of history is not straight, but jagged with rises and falls, with forgotten chapters that modern textbooks prefer to ignore. Consider how many manuscripts were lost when the Library of Alexandria burned, or how much knowledge disappeared during invasions and the collapse of empires. Is it really so hard to imagine that devices like this once existed in greater numbers, but were erased by time and catastrophe? Some theorists go further, suggesting suppression. Knowledge, after all, is power. If the Antikythera mechanism allowed certain individuals to predict the heavens, imagine what it would mean if that power spread too widely. Perhaps elites had an incentive to keep such devices rare, hidden, or destroyed when no longer useful. Mainstream historians prefer simpler answers. They argue the Antikythera mechanism was unique, built by a single workshop of extraordinary skill, and lost with them when their city or patron fell. But even this explanation raises eyebrows. The level of precision needed to cut and assemble those gears suggests not alone genius, but an entire tradition of craftsmanship. How could such a tradition leave no other trace? Where are the half-finished machines, the training models, the written manuals? Silence again. It's as if the machine dropped into history out of nowhere, then disappeared the same way. Modern reconstructions of the mechanism using X-ray imaging have revealed even more astonishing details. The inscriptions on its dials are not crude. They are precise, technical, and written with confidence. Whoever made this device was not experimenting. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had the mathematics, the astronomy, and the engineering skill to design a machine that could compress the motion of the heavens into a box of bronze gears. That level of expertise implies predecessors, teachers, and a tradition that extended far beyond one wreck at the bottom of the sea. And this is where speculation grows. Was the Antikythera mechanism a survivor of an older hidden stream of knowledge, one passed down from civilizations lost to time? The Greeks themselves credited much of their wisdom to the Egyptians and Babylonians. Those cultures had deep traditions of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. Is it possible that somewhere, in workshops long since reduced to dust, machines like this were more common? If so, then our understanding of ancient technology is profoundly incomplete. This is why the mechanism fuels conspiracy theories. Because if one machine can slip through the cracks of history, why not others? Why not more advanced technologies we have yet to rediscover? Is it really so far-fetched to think that entire branches of science could be lost, erased, or deliberately hidden? Every empire that falls takes its secrets with it. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism is not an anomaly, but a clue, a fragment of a much larger pattern of forgotten brilliance. Even the circumstances of its discovery add to the mystery. Had those sponge divers not happened to descend on that wreck in 1901, the mechanism might still be buried beneath the sea. How many other artifacts like it lie, hidden on the ocean floor, undiscovered, waiting to challenge our view of history? The oceans cover the vast majority of Earth's surface. We have explored only a fraction of them. What if the past we think we know is only the tip of the iceberg, with the rest waiting in the dark below? The Antikythera mechanism forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about human history. Was progress always this fragile? Did we climb to great heights of knowledge, only to collapse and forget, again and again? And if so, what does that mean for us now? If entire civilizations can rise, create wonders, and vanish, what makes us think we are immune to the same fate? The Antikythera mechanism is not just a machine. It is an insult to the narrative we've been told about human history. If we accept it as real, as authentic, then we must also accept that knowledge can rise to incredible heights, only to be smashed down, erased, and buried so deeply that even future generations cannot imagine it existed. That is terrifying, because it means progress is not guaranteed. Civilization can forget. And maybe that is exactly what happened. Wars, fires, invasions, they destroy not only lives but memory. When Rome sacked Syracuse, how many of Archimedes' inventions were lost forever? When the Library of Alexandria burned, how many manuscripts describing forgotten sciences turned to ash? If one fragile bronze device could survive 2,000 years at the bottom of the sea, imagine what treasures have been lost in places where fire and steel consumed everything. The Antikythera mechanism is not a miracle. It is a survivor. And every survivor carries the silent testimony of 1,000 others who did not. But let's not pretend loss alone explains this. History shows patterns of suppression, deliberate control of knowledge. The printing press was feared when it appeared. Astronomy was censored when it contradicted dogma. In every era, there are those who see knowledge not as something to share, but as something to hoard. What if the Antikythera Mechanism was considered too powerful, too dangerous to spread? Predicting the heavens, commanding the rhythms of time, such abilities could elevate a few above all others. Perhaps its makers chose secrecy. Perhaps rulers demanded destruction. Or perhaps priests and kings used it in shadows, never allowing the wider world to know. If so, then its vanishing was not an accident. It was an act of control. And here is the irony. Its rediscovery came not from scholars, but from sponge divers risking their lives in the deep. Ordinary men stumbled upon something that elites of the ancient world may have killed to possess. It is almost poetic. Knowledge hidden by power, forgotten by history, revealed by chance. What else lies waiting like this? Under sand? Under water? Under ruins? Modern science has reconstructed the mechanism with X-rays and 3D modeling, showing just how advanced it really was. But reconstruction also exposes something more uncomfortable. Even now, we do not fully understand every function. There are dials whose purposes remain debated, inscriptions we cannot completely interpret. This means the people who built it knew things we still struggle to comprehend. And that forces a disturbing question. How much smarter were they than we give them credit for? Mainstream historians prefer to downplay the implications. They tell us the mechanism was a one-off, a genius ahead of his time. But history rarely works that way. Genius does not appear in a vacuum. Great inventions rest on traditions, on shared knowledge, on the work of many hands. The Antikythera Mechanism hints at an entire tradition we cannot see. A branch of history lopped off, leaving only this single artifact as a stump. And if traditions can be erased, then our understanding of history is not just incomplete, it may be deliberately skewed. We assume progress is linear. Stone tools, bronze, iron, machines, computers. But what if the line loops? What if we rise, fall, forget, and rediscover? If the Antikythera Mechanism is evidence of such a cycle, then our modern age is not the peak of knowledge, but only another crest, doomed perhaps to collapse and be forgotten in turn. That possibility should unsettle us, because it means our technology, too, could vanish, and future generations could look at the wreckage of our world with the same disbelief we feel now. They could stand over a rusted microchip and ask, how could they possibly have built this? Just as we stand over a corroded gear and wonder the same. And this leads to the bigger question. Do we really want to know the truth? Because the truth forces us to abandon comforting stories. It means admitting that our ancestors were not simple, primitive, or ignorant. It means conceding that civilizations may have risen to extraordinary heights, only to vanish so completely that we now consider their achievements impossible. It also means acknowledging that power, not knowledge, determines what survives in history. And if power demands ignorance, then ignorance is what endures. The Antikythera Mechanism is more than a machine. It is a message whispering from across 2 millennia. You do not know the full story. Maybe that is why it captures imagination so strongly. Because deep down, we all suspect that the version of history we were taught is not the whole picture. We sense the gaps, the silences, the things that do not add up. And this machine, with its impossible gears, gives those suspicions a shape. It dares us to question. So we are left with choices. We can accept the official story, a unique artifact, the product of one genius, lost by chance, irrelevant to the grand march of progress. Or we can ask the harder questions. Who built it? Who suppressed it? What does it mean for our understanding of civilization? And most importantly, what else have we lost? Because if a machine like this can vanish, then nothing is safe. Knowledge can be buried. Truth can be erased. And history, as always, belongs to those who control the story. The Antikythera Mechanism is one of those discoveries that refuses to stay silent. Every time someone looks at it, every time researchers unlock another detail, it pushes against the edges of what we think we know. And maybe that's why it fascinates us so much, because it exposes how fragile our idea of history really is. For centuries, we believed technological progress was steady, linear, unstoppable. We told ourselves the story of human beings rising from stone tools to steam engines, from fire to electricity, step by step. But the Antikythera Mechanism is a crack in that story. It whispers that maybe we rose higher before, and then fell. That maybe brilliance has burned before, only to be smothered by war, chaos, or control. The most unsettling part is not the machine itself, but what it implies. If such knowledge could exist 2,000 years before its time, then what else has been erased? Could there have been other sciences, other breakthroughs, entire traditions of technology that we no longer even have names for? And if so, how would we even know they existed, unless by accident one more artifact slipped through the cracks of destruction? Think about the odds. One fragile device survives, hidden in a shipwreck, buried under the sea for centuries. Divers stumble upon it by chance, and even then, it takes decades before its significance is understood. How many other shipwrecks lie untouched? How many other devices lie beneath deserts, forests, and ruins, too corroded or too shattered to be recognized? The past is not gone, it is buried. And the question is not whether we will find more, but whether we will ever admit what they mean when we do. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Every time history confronts evidence that doesn't fit the neat timeline, the first instinct is to explain it away, to minimize it, to say it was unique, an outlier, irrelevant. That way, the story we prefer, the story of slow, predictable progress, remains intact. The Antikythera Mechanism challenges that comfort. And so, for over a century, scholars have argued about how to fit it into the box. Was it just one genius? Was it a freak accident of history? Anything but the possibility that ancient people knew more than we allow ourselves to believe. But maybe the lesson here is not about technology at all. Maybe it is about arrogance. We assume we are the pinnacle of civilization, that nothing before us could compare. The Antikythera Mechanism tells us to be humble. It says, others came before you, and they too could build wonders. And if they could rise and fall, then so can you. There is also the matter of control. Knowledge is power, but who decides how that power is used? If the Antikythera Mechanism was once used to predict eclipses and celestial cycles, then whoever held it could wield immense influence over religion, politics, and society. Was it kept in the hands of priests? Was it hidden from the masses? Was it destroyed precisely so its power could not spread? We may never know, but one thing is certain. Power decides what survives. Not truth, not justice, not even brilliance. Power. And that fact should make us uneasy about our own time. Because what if we are doing the same thing now? What if future generations will look back at us and wonder why so much of our knowledge vanished? What will they say if the servers fail, if the archives burn, if the data centers crumble? Will they find fragments of our machines and say, this should not have existed in their time? The Antikythera Mechanism is not only a relic of the past, it is a warning to the future. So where does that leave us? Staring at a rusted fragment of gears, asking questions with no answers. Who built it? Was it the work of Archimedes, of anonymous craftsmen, of a lost culture we no longer remember? Was it meant for science or for prophecy? Was it a marvel of knowledge shared or a tool of control deliberately erased? Every answer opens more questions, and maybe that's the point. The Antikythera Mechanism refuses closure. It refuses to be a simple story. It demands we accept that history is messy, fragile, and incomplete. That the truth is not always what we are told. That sometimes the past is stranger and brighter than we imagine. And so I leave you with this. If one machine like this survived, against all odds, what else might still be waiting out there? Buried under the sand, resting on the seabed, locked in ruins we haven't uncovered? And when we find it, because one day will we recognize it for what it is? Or will we explain it away, because it doesn't fit the story we prefer to believe? The Antikythera Mechanism should not exist, and yet it does. Which means the question is no longer whether the past was capable of brilliance. The question is, what brilliance have we already lost, and what does that say about us?